this, I had a thermostat. And I couldn't see, of course, what was wrote on the screen, whether the menu, because it's still there. So I said, sure. You get cut off, so I went back in again. And I got a person really hesitant. She said, oh, what was the first button that wrote this? And she wanted, you know, I'd tell her what to look for, and she told me. Yeah, it went well.
People look that jelly, and a lot of the cottages, if you just stay in cottages down in that area, you can only book for a week at a time. So you can't book 2 days. Well, we stayed in Belleville? In a hotel there for 2 or 3 months. And we didn't go for that worked out well. And we just kind of drive a little bit to get to the car. No matter what. Once you get there. But it is. Just like a Mexico Beach. Yes, all ocean, that's it.
You're ready. You got all your.
This area there, of course, because like we used to the ocean, but we're used to small ponds. Lakes, we have a few lakes, but most of them ponds that you can see the other side. So we went
Well,
there,
it is
it's just the ocean, of course, not the ocean.
Oh, you're in trouble now.
It's here.
So you're meeting at the museum on Thursday?
Yeah, Maddie's will be at the museum. She'll go directly from work to the museum.
Oh, okay.
She was asking if we will have dinner
And
at
everybody's
the
in
museum.
there, nobody's
There's a
below.
cafeteria.
Oh, okay.
So I told her, no, we won't, because Eva is on vacation, so
Even the
we'll
dog
be
is in the area.
leaving from her home.
Bring your dog.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So we just had to go in London, so we took him down there. It was
Yeah.
funny because he was walking.
So yeah, Ina will be
Stand.
vacation this week
Drops
from
off,
Wednesday to
so
Friday.
you can be walking along
She's
next to
coming
you
over
already down.
Wednesday morning.
Anyway, here's
So
poor
that
dog, he's just walking along next to him, he's underwater because the sand.
Oh, okay.
So
Well,
then
she
you
can
see
come
him
with us
swim,
then.
Oh, yes.
I'm gonna
paws
get Pedro
eating
across the
sand
central
again,
restaurant.
so all three of you are a
Yeah,
challenge
that's
for
right.
him.
I go there.
I've never, well, I think I was there once. I've never,
And then we walk out.
haven't been here in
and sit
ages,
on the sand.
so it's,
They have nice lunch menus.
okay.
Like the sausage.
Oh, I do, so that's what I'll be having.
Yeah, and the fries are very nice.
Are they really?
Yeah, I like the French fries there.
Okay.
But they have like daily plates, you know.
Some kids just go.
Yeah. But they have a list of 5 items every day.
Okay.
Nice little trip, it's nice area.
Okay.
Always nice, really homemade.
Oh, is it really? Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
we've never really.
So that'd be Wednesday.
Wednesday at noon,
I don't
yeah.
know what suits on Wednesday.
Yeah.
On Friday is the French Canadian restaurant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I like it.
Oh,
Yeah.
up there.
Very, it's almost a meal.
This time last year, I had my brother and his wife flew to
Yes, we got rain, but
and we got
it's
trained.
like that. It's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Instead of I got a chair. Well,
Okay,
I
good.
A few days,
And I thought I
they
heard
flew
Richard,
on
yeah.
home. We come on, tell them what.
try to.
It's nice now that they're all getting the kids
Yeah.
growing up, that they can
Oh my God, you got
wander.
it done.
It is 18 and 20 now, so they got legs all free.
I've had a dog.
Yeah, had it for a long time. Not my first one.
Oh, I never knew that. Oh, boy.
He lost the vaccine.
Doesn't take much to create. one piece of information.
I know when you go by the voice of that, you know.
We have
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Did I tell you the other day I walked up my neighbors the street where I live?
Yeah.
He's
I'd love to go to
doesn't hear
Louisiana,
much.
maybe.
Oh, okay.
So,
I bet you.
and I don't see why. And I get out of the house, I think I was throwing the garbage. And I see the shadow.
Yeah.
He's a big guy, you know. So
Yeah.
someone say, hey, Sayonara. And just,
Sorry to go to, like,
just like what he was doing, so I said he didn't hear me. So I go closer to him and I raise my voice and I say, hey, Yamala. And then the guy looks at me and walks away, he goes away.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So a few days later, I tell Ronald, I meet Ronald again, and I tell him, hey, you know, like the other day I saw you up I don't think you heard me.
Well, I
He
shouldn't
said,
say that.
oh, I wasn't home. He said,
But it's so
but
funny.
he said, maybe you saw the guy I asked to come to.
Oh my God.
So, you know, the guy sits aside and
Yeah.
he's there. He's on this planet.
Yeah.
Like,
So
yeah, that's what I
that's pretty good.
Yes, the guy must have said, what's wrong with that guy? The first time he just let it go. The second
Yeah.
time I raise my voice and I get closer.
Yeah.
And look, I gotta get it.
Oh, I've done that. I got in the wrong car before.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's good.
Oh yeah, they were
Oh,
like,
yes, yes, right.
yeah. Oh, it's so easy to do.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. And sure enough, before we left, we came back on 15th
Well,
November.
we were when I had like all vision, my brother and I, he was basically we were in Santos in 1992, and I had developed macular degeneration, so I had really low vision, but I could still see around. So I put a washer in the Hard Rock Cafe in Skyline.
Yeah.
And I was down, there was all this big mirror there. And my brother was in somewhere else in the washer. And he said, he could hear me saying, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me. And what it was, and he's going to be a fight or something. I was like, this guy, and it was me saying, excuse me to myself in the mirror.
Oh, yeah.
Every time I move,
Yeah, the guy would move the... Excuse me.
excuse me.
I did that at the CCB. There was one area of the room there where there was a big mirror on the wall.
Yeah.
Then the bottom of the wall was wood.
Okay.
And I was going for a bar.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking for. Is, something half light,
Yeah.
wood. And,
Yeah, that's right.
and as I was walking towards the bar, I could see this smiley figure of a handsome man looking at me, And I said, I've got to get good service here.
Yeah.
And the guy's checking me out as I'm walking towards the bar.
Yeah.
Then I get to the bar and I place my order. And I noticed that when I touch my hat, the guy touched his hat.
Yeah, it's an up-all.
And someone was coming at me saying, do you need help?
Yeah, I think I do. I'm trying to order a beer for myself.
Mirror will give you a beer. You need to make some assumptions to
Oh, yeah.
put together the little information you get.
You can't take your life, you can't take yourself too serious.
Where? Oh, is that here? Who's there? Oh, and Shangela's. Hi, how are you?
Who's that?
It's Shelly.
Shelly.
Causing trouble.
Where are you?
I'm right here. Causing trouble. How are
Why are you
ya?
causing trouble?
Because it's what I do. How are ya? You know what? The Susans, Maura and Gerald are all they're moving into their own place. Isn't that exciting? Do you feel old? I don't feel old, no. I should, because I've known them so I've known Maura since she was 6. And you've known her since before she was an idea. Hello. Oh my gosh. Hi, David. How are you?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm good. So Somebody's saying boo to me. It's like saying boo to a goose.
So when are they moving?
They're slowly moving into their own
Oh, yeah.
place now. Yeah, so
How is Susan doing?
she's great. Yeah, and this whole thing's kept her really busy. She's been really, really busy. Yeah, but it's been good. It's been a good busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's somebody put up his
Oh, well, she's not in it. Well, Laura works at a daycare. So she said, well, she's with kids all week, so I don't know whether that's going to happen. But yeah, that'd be something. But I don't think anybody's busy. You're all right?
How are you?
I am really now I'm there's nice and
Sorry, I'm hearing everything like 5 minutes late because it's being recorded, sent out onto the internet, sent back to my computer, and then I hear it. So,
So light.
yeah, they're really nice little tables.
like unrelentingly cold. Now, did you hear about my iPad disaster? About my iPad eating my notes?
No. Oh, well, there was something in the nose.
The iPad ate my notes, so we had to piece them together from memory.
Oh, from memory.
Pretty much, and Kim's memory's better than mine.
67, then I started.
So yeah, but this time I'll try not to let
They did a
you see what happened was is I had to leave
I got
it
enough vision to go. So you probably were there when I was.
because I still had a radio show to get together, so I had to speed off and so I left everything here.
And you have a radio show tomorrow, right?
So you go to the little room, and they have computer jobs on it, and writers, and all are like, and it's perfect, and just open up a Word document, and it's right there.
No, classes can wear double time.
So Shelly, do you want to sit up or you're sitting over there?
I'm over there and I don't
The notes, and it used to 6 hours, but you know, when I was thinking
the GTT is the best. I love you guys. I cannot believe
We
how
love you
great,
too.
how
You
great
can
the
talk about us all
GTT
day
is.
long.
But you know what?
I
now
don't
Facebook-
don't let Vangelis talk about us because Vangelis will tell me that you lost it.
What?
I
Vangelis will say what?
Well, I broke his braille. You know.
You broke his braille.
Well, no, I didn't. But you know what? This is weird, Rebecca. You should tell me.
Don't worry. It's actually these are lucky.
Vangelis
So.
has an iPhone
they're
5
good.
and a Brilliant 32.
Yeah.
The Brilliant is making this weird things, like when you write a punctuation, it spells out the word like apostrophe or question mark.
Huh, that's so weird.
And it did it with the focus.
It's so annoying.
But now when we paired his phone with the focus, and now we can't get it to pair again with the braille.
We got a wedding.
So I wrecked something.
No, well, we'll fix it. I'm sure.
I did something bad, which I don't know what I did.
If you just sort of forget this device on both of them and then try it again.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
To tell it to forget what? Brilliant or the...
Forget the braille, well, forget everything. Forget the brilliant.
And then just try pairing one and then try pairing it.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll just need to have a little more.
Yeah, it's a puzzler. And he called
Yeah, even the sort of the main.
the head braille guy at Humanware. Didn't know.
Yeah, he said he has to look into that.
And he never told me that. He
But
looked
I don't
into
think it's a
it.
brilliant. I think it's a life.
He liked it because he did it with both displays. Have you ever heard of that before, Rebecca?
No, it's so
That is one of the weirdest things I've ever heard in my life.
I've never heard of that.
What braille display do you use?
I use the Focus 40 Blue. I've had no
That's a good display. I like it.
Oh, is that the grumpy
Do you
guys?
find it portable
I've heard
enough?
of them.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you have?
Fantastic.
Use it with your phone.
I do, yeah. I use it with my phone quite a lot.
So George, does it matter? You just put it anywhere on your.
Anywhere that, you know, basically can see your mouth. So just onto your shirt is fine.
You gotta click a microphone on your. I just gotta find. Wait, I'm gonna. You should have one.
This one?
Do we have to turn it on?
Nope, it's already on.
Is this a microphone?
Yes, it is. There's a box on one end and a microphone at the other end.
This one?
So you click this.
Anywhere?
And pretty much.
You want to test it? Test it
Are they working? Are they working, George?
Yeah.
And they're on?
Welsh cakes on the right.
The Welsh cakes, oh my God, the Welsh cakes.
No, the other way. No wonder you got a broken
And I can go back.
Okay, so we're gonna start. So that's awesome.
authority.
We didn't give them any pizza now.
No,
Did you want pizza?
no, I'm fine. I ate, thank you.
So, welcome to GTT, June 15th, and welcome to those people listening in on the CCB YouTube channel. This is a bit of an experiment for them to listen live and give us some feedback. Because George, since the last time when the sound quality was not very good, George got a better microphone that's sitting in the middle of the table to hear all of the sounds that we make and all of our comments better. So Vangelis and I have, we have the good mics pin on our shirt because Vangelis is going to be our speaker tonight. We were supposed to have, someone's mentioning GTT program. We were supposed to have an AODA speaker, but that person couldn't come and we couldn't find a local person soon enough. So Vangelis was very kind and offered to help us out by...
I was recruited.
I didn't coerce you, well then I broke your
think it's
grill plate.
Shanghai.
That was not a good idea. But I did ask him nicely if he would come. And then when he did show up, I would let him have the kind of pizza he wanted, which was olives and pineapples. So I guess I wasn't that
Double
nice.
abuse.
I broke his display and then I know I couldn't do that, but we had some issue with it. And so, so he's going to talk about advocacy, he's going to talk about CCD, where he's worked, and also CRPD, is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
And also a little about advocacy, but it was a bit of a last minute, so we just, he told me to say, please be patient with him. And then because I made him do things with his braille display and now it's not working, then he can't read his notes in braille, so not. Anyway, so maybe we'll go around and do the introductions. We'll just say who you are, and then we can ask George to ask the people listening if they want to say who's there. And then we can proceed with a few announcements, and then Vangelis will talk to us, and we can talk about advocacy. So I'm Kim Kilpatrick. I don't know.
Okay, Ellen Goodman.
Ian Lowry.
Jack Horowitz.
Rebecca Jackson.
Sandra Paquette. Fran Cutler. George Schleiser, and we have Jerry Harris joining us online.
Laura Ducal.
Shelly Ann Morris.
Sam Holton.
Wayne McWilliams.
John Castelli.
Wayne Antle.
David Green.
Godfrey Williams.
Mary Williams.
Andres Nikias.
Earl Virgil.
Heather Antle.
Joanne Walsh.
Okay, I think there'd be a few more people on the line at some point, and also there might be a few more people coming in, like Mike and that. So, yeah, I said we're gonna do the presentation by Vangelis. How do you say your name?
Jealous.
Vangelis, okay.
Unless you want to try to agree.
Well, how is it in Greek?
But jealous.
I'll let you know. Just a few announcements. One is that we are recording this. We also want to start podcasts, because I know how rabid blind people are about that, which including myself, who has like some wild number of podcasts that I download. And Shelley and I are going to co-host that podcast, because we're already doing our radio show, and George is going to record and audio edit our content, but we have to get the content. So if anyone wants to be on the podcast or has ideas for shows, themes, maybe, you know, blind people doing interesting things, different technology apps, or your favorite apps or your favorite device or something, feel free to let us know. Radio camps, we have space still. Under 21 is the last week of June to the first week of July, so June 29th and 30, July 2nd and 3rd. And the short week after the long weekend in August will be for over 21. And you could come in that one for 1 day, 2 days. You can do, if you have something you want to do for your own business or your own, just a certain interview you want to do or certain thing you want to learn, by all means, let us know that. We have a new conference line, which is better than the other one. If any of you were on, who was on? Sam was on. Were you on?
No, I wasn't. Not last Wednesday.
Was anyone here on that one? Except for me, maybe not. But it is much better. It doesn't throw people off. It can take way more people. But we are charged by the minute, so we're only going to use it for large calls, like the GTD national calls, which people have suggested that they go on over the summer. Last week we did a presentation by Tom Becker about LinkedIn. He's going to get me notes and then we will post those to the blog. It was very interesting discussion about LinkedIn. Maurice, who lives in Ottawa, has offered to do one about Dropbox. And also there's still a Facebook one coming up, and if people have other topics. Someone had a really interesting topic last week, except I know nothing about it, but blind people that do like renovation, you know, home renovation, or, you know, fixing things or painting or doing yard things. It could be kind of interesting. Do we want to drop in the summer, PTT? We thought maybe not a formal topic, but if people want to do the drop-ins in July and August, and a lot of people have said yes. So think about it. At the end, we'll kind of vote on that, but we could do one of two things. We could do a shorter drop-in, maybe an hour or an hour and a half. We could do just a drop-in regular time. I would just need to know ahead that there'd be enough people coming that we would feel that it was worthwhile, but a lot of people said yes, so we can vote on that on the at the end. Also, a few workshops going to come up. We are going to do one, I think, on VoiceStream Writer, which I really like. There's another new app from them called VoiceStream Mail. This came out last weekend. For free, you can put one of your mail accounts on it. And if you pay a subscription, you can dictate messages or put multiple accounts. I tried it briefly. Has anyone else tried it?
No.
Is
that a yearly subscription?
Yeah, $22 for a year. But it was interesting. But personally, I think he's gonna develop it more, but I don't think I would buy it, but you could try it out for free if you search for voice stream mail. I know that Apple Watch, does anyone have or got an Apple Watch that we could get our hands on to test? No?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Is anyone thinking of it? Yes? Who said that very quietly? Was that
Me.
here? Wait.
Heather doesn't know.
And Christmas is not on Zoom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you can sneak off and get. I know Lauren tested one briefly, and what did you think, Lauren?
It was overhyped.
Overhyped.
Yeah, it took a long time to load a lot of the apps, and it's, I don't know, I don't see the cost of outweighing the benefits, so I guess get it at your own risk.
If anyone does get one, I would like you to come here and sort of have a little round table where you kind of play with it to see, because I'd like to see it, but not at the Apple store where it's kind of noisy. So if anyone does get one or has a relative who gets it, wouldn't mind coming over for an hour or two and letting me check it out, because I can't even envision it. I don't even have a sense.
Yeah, it's hard to know because they are expensive and they don't do anything that your phone doesn't do.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. It means a neat gadget, but is it worth the money? And that's the.
I was in the Apple store a couple of weeks ago to look at the Apple Watch,
And?
and he wouldn't take it out of the case for me to look at, and he described it, but it sounded to me from what he was saying that the only thing it'll do when it's not paired with your phone is tell you the time. I'm not paying $500 for that.
I think you're right, but I think they still get it to do a few more things, but yeah. But I heard that too, that people weren't getting their hands on them.
Yeah.
And that is concerning to me.
I
That
think you have to make an appointment.
if you
isn't
make
it?
an appointment, yeah, you might be able to.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't need an appointment anymore.
Oh.
No? But if the guy wouldn't take it out of the box, I don't know.
Well, it was in a glassed-in case. There was a
Oh,
whole bunch of them lined up there, and I said, how much are they? He said, well, they're from $500 up to $24,000 or something.
oh my gosh.
I guess just whether they made a goal. But
Yeah.
when I asked him, what they would do, from what he was telling me, like I said, it's only, it'll tell time, and apart from that, it needs to be paired with the phone. Well, if I have the phone in my pocket, I can just press a button and it'll tell me what time it is.
So, anyone else have any announcements or things they want to say? I know Fran has one.
Yes. I have upgraded just in the last month to the new generation Stream, which I like very much, and I'm using direct to player, that's a thing. I have that I'm now for disposal to a good home, to somebody who'd like it. My previous generation Stream, which is in perfect working order, and I don't need it anymore. So get in touch with me at the break if you might be interested.
And if you know someone who might
Or you know
want
somebody
to
who
try out
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, and you can still download books from the CNIB library and sorts, but it doesn't do Bookshare and doesn't do some of the other things. Now, 10 days ago at Doors Open Ottawa, I went to the Ottawa Traffic Control Centre. Fascinating place to have a tour. I learned about the new generation of audible traffic signals they're working on, which will be helpful for people who are deafblind. In other words, they will have built-in vibrations as well as audible signals. I didn't know that at those intersections where you hear hoo-hoo or you hear a metal melody, the way you tell them apart is that the cuckoo is a migratory bird that goes north-south, and the melody is Canadian melody, and this is a very wide country, east-west. Now, everyone else probably knew that, but I didn't.
Oh, I didn't know that was the reason.
No,
Yeah, I didn't know the reason behind
So
it.
now you can't forget it because you know that cuckoos go north and south.
Did they say anything about getting the poles themselves to beep so people know where they are, identifying get close to a corner?
No, I didn't ask that, but I'm trying to follow up with the manager of operations. I have emailed into him, so I will follow up with him.
And the other question, a few of us have had this question, if there's an intersection near you that you feel you want a signal there that doesn't have it, I know when they put in new poles, they're supposed to put in audible, but what if you have one that needs it, how do you can call 311 or something, but is there a way that you can really get?
I emailed I called the 311 a year ago,
Yeah.
and I emailed 2 times to the City of Transportation,
Yeah.
and guess I'm requesting one right up by where I live, and no results yet.
Similar
So you can go online
Yeah.
on their webpage, and it'll direct you for a form to fill out.
Well, I did that too, and I want one at the corner near me because it's 2 one-way streets and it's very difficult when there's not much traffic. And they said, well, they didn't really, they said, okay, thank you, but then I never heard, and I tried again, I never heard, so I guess we're all in the same boat. But that would be something, Shelley and I are interested in getting someone on the radio show to talk about that. That's would be interesting to pin them down as to how do you actually get priority for these signals where you need them to be until light breaks and they decide to put in a new one.
I must say on the stop where I get off for work, the sign was set back from the edge of the roadbed and it was all covered with trees. So the drivers were constantly passing by the stop. So I went online and I filled out one of those forms and where it hit place for comment. I just put down that I was blind. I use a guide dog and the sign was covered with trees. And could they move the sign closer to the edge of the drivers and see it? But they did cut back the trees. So,
oh, good.
And that was just within the last 4 or 6 weeks that I did that.
That's good.
Actually, if I may interject, I've actually called, this is Shelley, I've actually called for 311 because out near where I take a bus, there was this great big gaping hole in the sidewalk where the sidewalk meets the road. There was a great big hole there. And I thought somebody's going to either trip or somebody who can't see or somebody coming through in the dark. And so I actually called 311 and I explained the whole problem. And within a few days they had it fixed and now it's all smoothed over and it looks fantastic.
So they did that fast?
Yeah, they
I
do.
wonder if it's different departments or what.
Playing the safety card is always a good time.
Yes.
You lost picks of it.
Tim, it's
Yeah.
Mike.
Hi, Mike. Mike's here.
I actually got an audible pedestrian signal installed in my new neighborhood. We moved there a year ago, and but 3 months before we moved, we emailed and said that I'd be having to cross Heron Street, where there's no, there was a set of lights but no audible pedestrian signal, to pick up my daughter every day at daycare. And first they said, they got back to us and said that they were going to be doing a feasibility study or something to that effect, and then we're just more persistent. And maybe if they provide some context, that, like I was very forward saying I'm blind.
And saying
I'm
you're
picking
bringing
up-
your daughter, I think that.
Yeah, I'm blind, I'm picking up my daughter, it's a busy intersection, and it got to about 2 weeks before we were moving there, it still wasn't there, and my wife actually went on Facebook and said, can everybody email this person? He was inundated, and he got back to us very quickly and said, actually, it's already been approved, they're working on it.
Well, that happened to me, not quite like that, but remember, Shelley, that big snowstorm?
Oh,
Shelley and I
yes.
worked in this office, and I had to climb it. We had to climb
Yes.
a mountain of snow,
Yeah, we
which
did.
if you tripped at the top or anywhere along that mountain, you would fall right out into Riverside Avenue. Like, it was very dangerous. And I called, I don't know how many times, and one of our colleagues took a picture of it, and we sent the picture to the city, and within hours, they came and did.
Yeah.
So sometimes a picture or getting a lot of people on Facebook would do, that could work, I think. But you're right, Mike. So you had it, it was pretty good, you got it right away, or?
Yeah, I mean, it took about 3 months, but a couple of emails. The Facebook thing, I don't think it actually did anything because they were already working on it, but maybe, I guess if you provide some context, perhaps. I don't know, it worked for us.
It's interesting, in my neighborhood where there's really, really old sidewalks and they're sort of, the curbs have disappeared completely. And it's interesting now, they're actually, this week, they're starting to put back sidewalks and curbs. It makes such a big difference.
Yeah.
Although the dog is already knows where they are, but
Yeah, but still.
yeah.
So, anyone else have any?
Yes, Kim. I just wanted to kind of throw in, I'm working on a new GTT Facebook page, and what I wanted to know is it worth me putting in the calendars app on there so people can hit, if they're coming to GTT, maybe yes, no, that type of thing? Would that be something that people would
How many
actually
people
use?
use Facebook? These are the event invitations, so you create an event and you say yes, no, maybe.
Yes, actually.
You would use that? Do some people use it or not use
Well,
it?
you send us a note.
Yeah.
And that's,
That's good
I
enough?
reply to that.
Yeah. That's a bit more accessible.
And you also put a Facebook reminder too, I think. Eh?
Sometimes, if I think through it. So people aren't really big on those event invites? No. It doesn't sound like
Would it hurt?
It doesn't hurt, no, but
It's not the
Depends
primary
how
way
long-
that people are gonna get off.
it depends how much work it takes.
Right.
Anything else? Okay, Vangelis sent me this introduction here, so I can read it. How do you say your last name now? Nikia?
Yes.
And how do you say your first name? The best way, Nikia. Has been active in human rights and disability.
Did you break
It keeps saying select words. It keeps telling me, I put my own reference. Disability issues for many years. Currently, he's working for the Council of Canadians with Disabilities, CCD, to raise awareness on the content of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, CRPD, during the United Nations, UN, negotiations of CRPD. Vangelis represented the Department of Human Resources and Social Development, Canada. HRSCC does all the acronyms, on the official Canadian delegation as content expert. In the 1990s, Vangelis chaired CCD's Human Rights Committee and served on Social Policy Committee. He has a background in adjudication, having served for 9 years as Vice Chair of the Ontario Social Assistance Review Board, Vangelis believes in the implementation of CRPD can contribute to the attainment of inclusive and accessible Canada. This can be achieved on the basis of genuine collaboration between Canadian governments and an aware and mobilized disability community. Essential in this effort is collaboration with other concerned civil society organizations and their support. There you go. That was great.
Way to go.
So we're impressed by you now.
You should anyway.
Should we? So I would like to turn it over to Vangelis. Do you want to just present, or do you want to answer questions as you go, or what would you prefer?
Either. We can discuss it. We can talk about it.
Okay,
yeah. So CRPD, the two acronyms that I want to remember, they are CRPD, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and CCD, the Council of Canadians with Disabilities. Because at least in the Canadian context, CRPD is very closely linked to CCD. CCD used to be known as COPO, the Coalition of Provincial Organizations of the Handicapped, and it was the first pan-Canadian cross-disability political organization that was set up in the mid-1970s. And it has pursued social change through advocacy at the systemic level in the country. And so about 15 years ago, when the discussion at the UN started to negotiate a thematic convention on the rights of persons with disabilities, CCD became the main civil society representative organization that worked on this issue for many years, very closely with government at the time, and through the negotiations and then ratification, and now is working to raise awareness, which is what I'm doing, and also to make sure that the convention is implemented. So what
can you say again, CRPD stands for?
Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, CRPD. So I'll give you a bit of an overview of CRPD, but before I do that, I think I should give you a bit of the history of how we came to have international human rights instrument that has been negotiated through a huge process at the UN, a process in which states participated, many other interested organizations and people, academics, the Catholic Church, many others, and of course, for the first time in world history, representative organizations of persons with disabilities. Any questions so far? When you hear the term human rights, what do you think of human rights? What comes to mind? Does anybody want to venture? The first thing that comes to your mind?
Race, gender, religion.
Basic. Disability. Equality, justice.
Interesting. So actually, this is a typical response, because really the first thing that should come, that comes out of the study of human rights is trouble. It's
Trouble?
It's trouble. So if you think in conflict, if you think about the first time that about the Magna Carta, it was really political conflict between feudal lords and the English kings that sort of put them together, brought them together to come to agree on some way of behaving in a civilized manner towards one another. Of course, they didn't stop what happened in the 16th century, but it provides some basis. Now, the contemporary history of human rights, the modern history of human rights, really starts with the Second World War. As humanity, in the world of the Universal Declaration, was actually committing barbarous acts, they were also thinking, and in the famous discussions between Churchill and President Roosevelt, they actually talked about the Atlantic Charter, and they talked about the United Nations. And in that context, they talked about a document that would regulate interstate behaviors in the future and would limit the types of aggression and barbarity that had been exhibited during the war. So the first actually, the source document of modern human rights is the State of the Union address by President Roosevelt in 1942, in which he spoke about the freedoms that the world should enjoy in the future. Now, this all culminated in 1948 when they had negotiated the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It was a declaration. In international human rights law, a declaration is known as a soft instrument. In other words, it's not mandatory, it's not binding. It is really a statement of principles that states should follow of their own accord. One of the problems people with disabilities have is that in 1948 we were not strong enough, we were not educated enough, and we were not organized enough, and we did not participate in that process. In fact, very few non-governmental organizations participated in 1948. Because of this absence, disability is only mentioned once in the Universal Declaration, and it's not mentioned in the key articles that set out the grounds for human rights. Now, this became a problem over the next 50, 60 years as many states were coming into being as a result of decolonization, because they would take the Universal Declaration as a guide of organizing their human rights regimes, and of course disability was not anywhere. So the problem became known as the invisibility of disability in the UN system. Now, the proof of that is that even if you take, for example, the first Canadian human rights instruments, the Bill of Rights, and for example, the Ontario Human Rights Code in the early 60s, they didn't say anything about disability. So disability was absent. It was absent in the Universal Declaration, and therefore absent in the documents that were created or inspired as a result of the Universal Declaration. In Canada, actually, we had to fight in the 70s and 80s to include disability in the human rights legislation. And of course, this is where CCD and indeed CNIB come into play. When the first draft of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms was introduced, Section 15, the equality section, did not provide protection for Canadians with disabilities. And in fact, it did not provide protection for Canadian women. So both women and persons with disabilities had to publicly challenge the political leadership at the time in order to secure inclusion in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And that was done successfully. And that was important because later when we started working on CRPD, about 20 years later, the fact that we had a reference to disability in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is really the supreme law of the country and cannot be easily changed without a lot of intergovernmental negotiations, we were able to use that to promote actually strong language in the UN. And if you compare the Section 5 of the CRPD, Article 5, which deals with equality and non-discrimination, you will see that it tracks very carefully the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Section 15. So by the 1990s, the disability community worldwide was organized enough, and because of the invisibility problem, it kept raising the idea that since a number of other instruments had been developed and were producing slowly, but were producing some positive effects for other people, like people who faced racial discrimination, gender discrimination, for children, people with disabilities argued that really this problem of invisibility should be remedied, and that the way to do that is to develop a binding international human rights instrument to protect the rights of persons with disabilities. So that process sort of started in the General Assembly,
and those processes move very slowly. You have to pass a resolution and then pass another one, reaffirming it, and then passing another one and say that the previous resolution is still important and we shouldn't lose sight of it. And that takes time, and states resist because they have problems with what financial implications these agreements may have for the future. But the anecdotal story is that, and it's always important, that's how high-level change for disability has happened. In the 1990s, the then president of Mexico, we don't know that for a fact, but we think that he had a relative with a disability. And he instructed the Mexican delegation in the UN to provide advice and logistical support to the organizations that were arguing for a disability convention. Now, the UN is a labyrinth. It's really something that unless you have a lot of experience, you cannot really find your way around. And having the Mexican delegation provide that type of leadership was actually very important. As a result, of the various resolutions and a study that actually documented the problem of invisibility, in other words, it took UN human rights related decisions and showed chapter and verse that because of the absence of disability in the Universal Declaration, a number of other documents were also neglecting to promote the rights of persons with disabilities. So when all this happened, in 2002, there was a committee struck, an ad hoc committee to which all states can participate, and that started the process of negotiating a convention. Kim mentioned that I had some experience with human rights and adjudication. Now, as I had just joined the government, I was asked to participate in this process, and it was quite an interesting process. The first thing that I remember is that the state delegations are led by professional foreign affairs lawyers, and they are very experienced about negotiations, and they know a lot about trade and things like that. They don't know much about human rights, and they are not particularly interested in human rights. So it was really left to disability organizations and other allies to cause a huge educational effort in the UN and to change the paradigm, to have professional negotiators think about human rights and accessibility and blind people and deaf people and sign language and braille and things like that. And the encouraging thing is that by the end of this 6 years that this process lasted, we had many converts. So many, in fact, that the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is the first human rights instrument negotiated in our century, and the fastest negotiated, and also the fastest ratified. Over 150 countries worldwide have ratified the convention by now. Any questions so far? I have a few more sort of comments to make about CRPD itself.
Any questions, or questions even online?
Did Canada sign on very early? Were they one of the leaders?
Canada signed on the first day it was opened, and I was actually asked to go and be part of the ceremony. I was very pleased. And Canada, so that happened on January 30, 2007, and then Canada ratified it 3 years later. Signing and ratifying mean two different things in international law. Signing means you respect an instrument. In other words, you don't do anything to derogate harm it, derogate from it. But ratification means that you actually take practical steps to put it into practice.
So is it in legislation now, in Canadian legislation?
Except a few international agreements, international agreements are not implemented by legislation. But Canada ratified in 2010 following a unanimous resolution in the House of Commons and with the support by all provinces and territories. So it has a lot of political, in principle at least, a lot of political support in Canada. But we don't have an implementation plan yet, and so I think it's left to CCD and CCB and CNIB and ABC and the Canadian Association of the Deaf and everybody else to make sure that politicians actually do what they claim credit for.
So we need legislation to really support the rights of Canadians with disabilities.
Well, we could have legislation. I think what we need at this point primarily is an intergovernmental implementation plan. It could be done through legislation, but if it was done through legislation, it would be done either at the federal level or province by province. So I think the most practical thing that we need right now is an intergovernmental implementation plan.
That's interesting. I was thinking of it in relation to the Marrakesh Agreement, which is the same. Right. It was signed on or assented to by a lot of nations, but then it had to be brought back and taken through each legislature. And actually it is becoming part of the amendments to the Copyright Act,
right,
which is part of Canadian legislation.
Right.
So it actually is going to end up in a piece of legislation.
Yeah, and the UN Convention could be included in some legislative, but it is a more general issue, and many other human rights advocates in Canada are concerned about the implementation problem that we have with other human rights instruments. And some people think that we should somehow have an implementation, human rights implementation, International Human Rights Implementation Act, but I think for anything like that to happen, it will have to become first a political election issue in Canada. It won't happen in the short term, I don't think. But there are other people who are concerned and thinking about this.
I guess that's the similar question we all had about the AODA as well. It is legislation, but no one knows how, I don't say no one knows, but it's hard to figure out what you do when you notice something, or what you do, when you want to tell them something, or how it's connected to. I think it's similar. You can pass it and everyone says it's great, but then what do you do when you're faced with situations where that should apply to you, personally, right? I think
you're right. The proof is in the details. Like you hear a lot of stories about the ADA in the US and how much stronger it is, and how Americans can draw on that. But I don't really know how an individual in Ontario could use the AODA.
Really, it doesn't seem like
no.
it.
Well, I think many of the sort of progressive provisions, including human rights, haven't really happened without constant effort by those who are affected. You remember when we, when it started, I said that human rights is, trouble. It relates to trouble.
So people like Mike's wife and everybody getting Facebook to get him to signal. If he'd been the only one, he might not still have it. You know what I mean? But when you get a lot of people saying, "Look, no, this is what we need. We need all of this to have."
But a lot of our human rights comes back to the Charter, which is a general agreed upon statement. And then it gets tested through the courts so that the detail is worked out through the courts. Would it not be similar
Well, yes, it is. Our human rights, our human rights actually come primarily from the Universal Declaration. They predate the Charter. The Charter was a way of bringing all those human rights ideas, including the idea that governments shouldn't be able to do what they did in October 1970, to put it in the Constitution so that governments cannot easily get out of it. So the Charter and human rights come together at some point, but the basic effort to enact human rights in Canada and in many other countries come from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
I have another question which is very different in nature, but so all of the different disability groups you mentioned, the deaf, people that were deaf and people that were blind and various, were they pretty amicable? Because sometimes there are different things of greater importance to those communities. Not to say, we don't care what the other groups are, but did it work out well? Did people work together well across disability lines?
In Canada or worldwide? During the negotiations, all the major world federations, the World Federation of the Blind, the World Federation of the Deaf, International Disability Alliance, Disabled People's International, all those groups and others were represented in the UN. They were accredited, and they followed the process carefully, and every day they made interventions about the wording, because the convention, perhaps I can speak to you a bit about that. There are a lot of devils in the detail. Basically, the convention does two things. It takes existing human rights that had already been spelled out, and it simply says that disabled people, persons with disabilities actually is the term, without any doubt, without any questions, enjoy all the fundamental freedoms and human rights that have been spelled out in the UN system. And the reason it does that is because of the problem of exclusion, the problem of invisibility. And in fact, in Article 1, the purpose article, we've used a couple of times the word all persons with disabilities, all fundamental freedoms. And the reason we use the word all is to preempt some smart young lawyer in the future, primarily working for a Department of Finance or some company, who might say that no, it doesn't quite mean people who have severe disabilities, because if that was meant, it would have been spelled out. And because you cannot possibly spell out every disability experience, we thought we would try to use words that would preempt that. Now, there is another interesting thing about the convention. It doesn't have a comprehensive definition of disability. And that's because it's almost impossible to negotiate in a legal instrument a comprehensive definition of disability. I remember when we started this process, I remember a Nordic country was showing data that would have 19% of its population as disabled, and a southern country was showing less than 3%. And so it's not possible that somewhere in Norway you would have, that in Norway and Sweden you would have 20% of the population being disabled, but in a southern country you would only have 3%. It's a question of who you count, because who you count, you have to have public policy and programs to benefit, right? So what the best we could agree is that disability is basically based on the existence of an impairment, and disability is a barrier that results from the interaction between persons with impairments and the environment, the social, the economic, the cultural, the political environment. So, and the key thing here is that disability is an evolving concept. Why is it an evolving concept? You know, in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it says physical and mental disability. There are no more words than that. There is no comprehensive definition. Now, since 1982, it has been found in tribunals that people who suffer from AIDS, for example, in certain situations, they are persons with disabilities. Now, in 1982, AIDS might have been mentioned in the radio once or twice, and you would have never been able to, you could have written blindness into a comprehensive definition, and deafness and things like that. But AIDS, you would never get into both for scientific and especially for political reasons, right? So it's better to be broad and allow society and social experience to evolve and come up with its own solutions. It would be extremely arrogant if in 1982 we had written a definition that would have been proven anachronistic 10, 20 years later. So the convention has the purpose, then it has a number of definitions, an article with definitions, and in the definitions it's interesting that, for example, under languages, it says that spoken and unspoken languages, including sign language.
And then I would write the answers out on the computer.
So you weren't using a braille display at all, or any kind of braille?
No, I was doing everything electronically.
So you were listening.
And
then writing back.
And there was also components where I had to read. So like I would get something in braille as well, and I would just read it, in braille as well. So those were the components that I had to do.
And would that be a kind of test you'd get extra time for?
I got the entire day to do it, but I'm not sure that I got extra time or not.
I would think so, because they certainly provide extra time for children with dyslexia and other perceptual disabilities.
So, and that's what I was getting at, is that, at least in developed countries, there's progress being made, but Vangelis, I totally get that one needs to be vigilant and persistent, and that was my question then was, so as individuals, do you have a suggestion for, it's one thing to say that it should, let's say these human rights ideas should be implemented, but what does an individual do beyond that?
How can people assist with
how do people make a difference?
Well, I think even the discussion we are having today presumably is a way of becoming somewhat aware, and then, you can do it in two ways, I think, 2 or 3 ways. First of all, you can do it by talking to I think some people will make it an issue during the election. You can relate it to specific problems, barriers, needs. Here's a trouble issue, right? When you face, or other people face, you can tell them that this is a way of talking to authorities about it, right? But the other thing is that the existing organizations can make it part of their work. It does take a long time. There's no question about that. It takes a long time for these things to... basically what we are talking about is changing human behavior in society, right? So it's a long process. I want to tell you a couple of things about some other key articles. So Article 1, Article 2, I mentioned the definitions. Article 3, I want to mention, it's the principles of the convention. And I want to say 2 things about that. One is that for the first time in international law, we have accessibility included as a principle, accessibility the way we mean it. The other point is, and that's very interesting.
What do you mean by the way we mean it?
Well, accessibility that relates to persons with disabilities. access that, to buildings, to information, to all kinds of things that relate to us, right? It's so now when other UN tribunals and systems face the word accessibility and they need to interpret it, because it's now in an international instrument, they will also have to take into account the meaning that we understand when we talk about accessibility. The other interesting principle has to do with a very difficult problem that we have faced for a long time. Disability basically for many years in social science has been thought of as a deviance, as an abnormality, as something to be worried about, to be afraid of, and to sort of keep away from, right? And actually there are sociology and social science textbooks in the 50s and 60s that talk about people with disabilities as sick. It's the equation of disability and sickness. Now, in this convention, in Article 3, it basically states, and that's the important part, states have said that they perceive now disability as being, they express respect for difference, and they accept disability as being part of the human experience and in fact of human diversity. So again, that is at first sight, or when you first hear it, you think, oh, so what that means? What it means really is that we are starting to, and this is especially relevant in an aging society, we are starting to, that our governments start to say, at least officially, that they espouse now conception of disability that occurs in society and humanity, that it's really part of the human experience, part of the human diversity. There is another article that I want to mention to you, Article 4, and Ellen, when you say what you do, Article 4 basically, governments have spelled out what they're supposed to do to correct the barriers, the problems citizens with disabilities face. And one of the things that they have agreed to do, and that's important, is that as they develop legislation and policy that concerns persons with disabilities, they have now agreed that they actually are to do that in consultation with representative organizations. And in Canada we've had this to various degrees, but remember that this is an international instrument, and in many other countries, as a result of this provision, we now hear of active engagement by governments with disability organizations. So they sort of go to them now, or the organizations go to governments and say, you're doing this, we have to talk about it. We have a say about it. It affects us, and therefore you are now bound. You have actually signed a document that says that you are supposed to talk to us. So that's very important. CCD did a study over the last few years in collaboration with four universities. It's known as CURA, C-U-R-A. It's a Community University Research Alliance. So they did a study, and the study basically has found that although we have made progress, Canadians with disabilities still continue to face barriers and to face high unemployment and poverty. So these issues will be raised in the next federal election. CCD, if you go to the CCD website under social policy, you will find background papers that spell out both the findings and the recommendations of this study. But the way this connects to CRPD is with Article 28. And Article 28 is about the standards of living. So in Article 28, countries, and again, this is important to us, but it may be even more relevant and practically more important right now for other countries. What governments have agreed is to provide an adequate standard of living for their citizens with disabilities, including food, shelter, and including some level of disability supports. Disability supports is very important for us here too, because in some provinces we have technical devices, in other provinces we don't, right?
Yeah.
So if we had, for example, what I mentioned, the implementation, intergovernmental implementation plan, it's possible that the issue of the provinces where we don't have any form of devices, technical devices, that this could be addressed in such a plan.
And I think that's tied in with what, Ellen, I know you've said it before, I know, Rebecca, you said it, other people, I don't know, I've said it. Say devices, smartphones are not just phones for people who are blind, because all of the apps do so many things like we've seen here that you need, or that you can use to help you in your daily life. It's not a frill or something. It's not even. It's something that makes your life much easier and safer.
Well, technology's leveled the playing field.
Yeah, so that
But not in every province.
Not
in every province.
And not in every way.
Not in every country.
It's not a panacea.
Right.
It's just
well, no, I mean it's not a panacea because it's not available, right? Yeah. So the final point I wanted to make, and then we can talk about it, or we can take a break and have Walsh cakes, is that what governments have agreed, and these are sort of more technical points, but if you ever want to talk to a politician, you send me an email and I'll provide you with specific references. But in Article 28, what governments have agreed is that the idea that as we make economic progress, as productivity happens in society, that the adequate standard of living of persons with disabilities becomes redefined. So, in fact, what they have agreed to do is continue to improve, that people with disabilities have a right to continuous improvement of their standards of living. So, I think there are many articles, of course, because what the convention does, it provides, it spells out the basic fundamental rights, and then it has a number of articles where measures to give effect to those rights are spelled out. So the convention has 50 articles. Obviously, I couldn't talk to you tonight about more than 2 or 3, but that's basically a basic overview.
It's amazing you did that, the
Yeah,
notes and last minute notice. Do people have questions, or does anyone even online have any questions they want to text in? Anyone else have a discussion? It's interesting discussion too about advocacy, and maybe we could have a bit of a discussion in general about advocacy and how people have achieved things with advocacy, and the tricky balance between really doing it and overdoing it or underdoing it, or I don't know the words. Do we want to talk a little more before we have a break? Just because, are there still people listening online, George?
There are 4 people,
So-
but nobody's commenting in the chat.
Who is there now?
I can't tell because they're not commenting in the chat.
Hello, 4 people. We'll maybe have a little conversation. about advocacy, and then we can take a break. We're closer to the time, so maybe then we can shut it down, the YouTube, well, because they don't want to hear us eating Welsh cakes. I don't think.
There's no virtual Welsh cakes.
Not yet.
That's not equal accessibility.
You can buy them with Bitcoin.
And it takes away from your adequate standard of living.
There's a lot of people here who've done some really good advocacy, and it's interesting. Do people want to comment on the way they've done it, or?
I'm thinking, Kim, it's 5:07.
Yeah, so could we do it till? Sorry?
Maybe $200.
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell that story.
Oh, yeah, my advocacy with Rogers.
Yeah, your advocacy with
Oh,
Rob.
I need to hear about that because it just jigged me.
Well, are we break? Oh, well, I can tell you this quickly. I've been, one of my pet peeves is how inaccessible television is. Even though there's descriptive video, you can't easily access it because the interface with the TV, whether it's a set-top box or a PVR, is totally not accessible.
Totally inaccessible.
So I've been emailing Rogers, and I followed up. I emailed them in the spring, and I got a reply back that they forwarded my concern along. And then I emailed them again in June following up, and the person called me back and said, you've already sent this request in, and I forwarded it along, and I said, yeah, that's all well and good, but do I get a progress report? Do I know what's going on? Well, she said, there's nothing really. We forwarded it on to our planning department. So then I said, well, that's not really good enough. I'd like to speak to somebody higher up. And first she said there was nobody. And I said, well, who did you forward it to? So then she said, well, it goes up, planning, the office of the president. Well, I said, can I speak to the office of the president? And she said, well, I will have somebody call you back. So somebody actually did call me back from the office of the president, and I had a chance to go over my points again. And the points I was making was what I'm asking for is technically possible. In fact, it's being provided in the US and UK. Accessible PVR set-top boxes, and also I was advocating for streaming services such as On Demand and Show Me that have no descriptive video, yet Netflix is able to provide descriptive video. So you can't argue it's not technically feasible. And she said she wasn't aware of some of that and it would be passed on, and she committed to keeping me in the loop.
Yeah. Who's above the president's office?
Yeah. Well, now
Who's above the president?
The only thing, yeah, that's right. The only thing she can do, and the point I made to her, I said, there's a lot of, I said, from some of the stats I've read, there's 500,000 blind and partially sighted Canadians who would benefit. And I said, if Bell came up with this first, I can tell you I'd be moving, and a lot of other people would. So I said, shouldn't Rogers be a leader in this? It's only good business. So she wrote all this down, and I said, well, I know this is not going to happen overnight, but I'd like you to get back to me and keep me informed of the progress. And she said she would. Now we'll see. That's where it is right now. But I think if anybody, that's a pet peeve of mine, of the importance of information. And I think that I would encourage anybody else, whether it's Bell or Rogers, to contact your cable company and really push for accessible PVRs and set-top boxes, because they can make a huge difference. If you combine that with the increased availability of descriptive video, it can really go a long ways to making television way more accessible.
Did she give you contact information?
I have her name and
We could all
her
phone her.
phone number.
Yeah, that's true.
Because what's interesting is most people stop, they do that first thing, and then they maybe do the follow-up. But when she said, okay, we'll have someone call you up, and you said, no, I want to speak to the president's office. And to me, that's great, because it shows that because I think, like Vandela said, you have to be patient.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to be patient, but then there are other times when you feel, okay, but I want to know who this person is, then I need to.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. You can't, you have to be patient, and I did email, and I waited 3 months. And when I emailed again and got the same response, then I think it's only right to escalate it. And well, the side benefit for me is, of course, I got a $200 Rogers credit for bringing it to our attention. But
we'll all get those.
Yeah.
Could we buy you off?
Yeah.
Could I have the same credit Wayne got?
Yeah.
Does anyone, I know, Fran, you've done a lot of advocacy.
Well, I just wanted to comment that what I was hearing as Wayne was talking was patience, persistence, determination, and knowing your subject and doing comparative research with other countries.
Yeah, good. Those are great points because it's true. You have to know exactly why you need. Sometimes I find too they don't understand why it's important to you to, or what might be the serious thing, like the audible signals, or you know, like Shelley said, that hole in the sidewalk. If she could then say, you know, people could fall, someone could break their leg, you know. I mean, not to be doom and gloom, but the thing is, if you just say there's a hole in the sidewalk, no one says anything, but there's a hole in the sidewalk, you know, by my building, and I'm blind, and I use a guide dog, and, or like David said about the bus stop, the driver can't see my stop and can't, I don't know, they might not stop there, and then I have to walk back, and, you know, when you can illustrate it with an actual story, then it makes a big, I think it helps.
And also, I think just knowing who to talk to, like finding out who is responsible for making the change and going to that source.
That's not easy, right?
That's not easy.
No, they don't want to tell you that.
Yes.
And, but the other thing I think is important too, if you're talking to a business, is trying to make it drive home to them the benefit to them as well. Sometimes that helps because sometimes they're not, I mean, we all should say you should do the right thing, but I think it's more important to try to say this could really have an impact on your business, you know.
You have to keep it cool.
You have to convince them that it's not only the right thing, but the bright thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Although I did scream at Rogers once very...
Oh, I screamed at a lot of times.
And I never knew this, and I was yelling on the phone, and I was screaming, and I said, how have you reduced me to this? I don't understand.
We've all been there with Rogers.
Well, one of the things, Kim, that you mentioned about, you know, when you're writing an email, you know, write it, draft it, and sort of
don't
think about
send it right away.
Don't hit that send button when you're
There are times where it's not ready to be sent. It's very passionate, but I don't know. I had a weird. This isn't really advocacy, but it kind of is. I had a weird situation last week when I was walking along here in the morning, well, along Bank Street. So a lady came up to me and she said, "Can I use your phone? Because I got locked out of this apartment building." And I said, "Where is it?" She said, "Over there." And I said, "Well, no, but I could make a call for you." And then she said, "Well, you have low vision." Well, I have low vision, you know, and I'm in my 60s. And she kept following me around. And I thought, she can't see my phone because my phone wasn't out. But I guess maybe she was preying on the phone situation. And in a way, I wanted to help her. Like, you know, you sort of want to. But I said, she kept following me and kept insisting. So I said, "This phone only works for blind people." And she stepped off. She said, "Oh." She said, "Fine then." She said, and she stepped off. And I thought, oh, I just did a really big misconception, you know, but at the same time.
This phone turns people blind.
But, you know, when you think about your everyday advocacy, I mean, you want to tell people that blind people use things everyone else uses, and it's good to be accessible out of the box, and I thought I just tore that up. What I meant really was that I had it set up for blind people to use, like she could, but I wasn't giving her my phone.
No.
And I felt a little bit unsafe, like, because she kept following me, and I thought, okay, well, but it's just, I don't know, like, I was thinking about advocacy, and I was thinking about it then, and I was thinking, I just tore down someone's advocacy, but I also, I don't know, it was just very odd. I don't know if I did the right thing, but I don't know. I mean, I wasn't going to give her my phone. But I don't know. It's an interesting, this whole advocacy. I don't know, some people newer to vision loss, maybe, I don't know if they want to say anything, because those of us who have been doing it for many years.
I want to say something about advocacy. I think one of the issues I think that the current generation will experience is that many of the things that they experience now, the good things.
I mean, younger people?
Younger people,
Yeah.
yes, and people who lose their vision or acquire disabilities now or later. I think maybe they assume that things were always like that, the good things. It's not the case at all. And I sort of, sometimes when I talk with people, we sort of talk about how we make sure that people get involved in advocacy. I have come to the conclusion that almost each generation has to rediscover, in a way, its own trouble again, right? And take steps to overcome those problems. It's, telling them the way we are doing it today is probably necessary, but probably it's not enough. Until people experience some difficulty, until they face an attitudinal barrier or another barrier, sometimes it's not a lived experience, therefore it doesn't register. And that's unfortunate, but that's how I think how people come to engage in action. Therefore, it's impossible for us to predict exactly how the younger generation can be trained, so to speak, to do advocacy. Some of it will have to happen just through their own experiences.
This may be a little bit aside, but how do you access described video on Netflix?
Under the audio menu, when you look at the audio menu, the languages, one will be described video. Yeah.
Is it easy to find it, Wayne?
And it depends what, I only know, like on the Apple TV, you hold in the select button, you keep holding it in until you hear it say closed caption, and then you go up one and go across, and audio is your next option. It's like there's 3 menus, and when you hit the down arrow, then it'll start cycling through like English, Spanish, French, English described if it's there. Yeah.
Have you used it, Rebecca? Have you used that?
Yeah. I've used it on my iPhone, and it's really simple. The first time you want to use it, you may have to log in out of your account and then back in again. You just look for, under languages, you'll find English audio description. They also have a web page that updates frequently with the list of audio described content.
And they're expanding it quickly. They've got about, I think, 50 or 60 shows now in audio description.
Wow, that was fast.
Yeah.
Because they had nothing there a few months ago.
Yeah, they really jumped into it. Like after, I think it came from Marvel's Daredevil, the story of a blind superhero. And when they got, there was a lot of advocacy in the U.S. about how can blind people can't watch a show about a blind superhero. But Netflix, they agreed to make that descriptive, and they made a commitment that they would make all their original series descriptive and provide it on other shows. And since that time, which is only probably 3 months ago, they've upped it to about 60 shows. So.
That's very interesting. Anyone else who hasn't said anything? Does anyone have anything to say that hasn't said anything? Or you could have said something, but...
I got one issue that I've run into a couple of times now, and it comes around the definition of assistive technology. You know, we used to in the past, it was very obvious what was assistive technology. And that is now changing that definition, because the smartphone is not necessarily assistive technology, but it suddenly has become mainstream. But we're still, as people who are blind, having the same problem accessing jobs, income, etc., even though that definition has changed. And I'm wondering if we're going to have to sort of recalibrate how we make our case in terms of getting support as someone who's blind and who has to compete.
You mean how to get access to employment?
Yeah, it's here's where it's come up. You know that CNIB has been looking at trying to move vision rehab, get it part of the health system, rather than it being part of the charitable system. And part of rehab is assistive technology. But as you know, there's help for that, there's financial help for that in some provinces and not in others. And so there's an uneven playing field when it comes to rehab that is part of the health system. And I've had a couple of discussions around this because I've been doing some work on it. And you run into this situation, well, things like phones and Apple computers are not assistive technology. Therefore, they should not be part of that aid that is given as part of rehab.
Kim, in regards to that, I have been talking to one of the youth employment for the province of Ontario, and what they're doing is they're doing a program where it's 40 youth ages 16 to 30, and they're wanting to do 40 youth in each area, and then what they're doing is they're supplying them with different jobs that they can do for a minimum of 6 months, and they're starting that pilot project in the fall.
So what do you mean? They take 40 youth with disabilities?
Yeah.
From different communities?
Yeah.
And how do they find the jobs that they match them with?
They find their skill set, and then what they'll do is they're working with partners, and they'll put them into different positions, maybe with a government position or a private sector position. And what they're doing is they're wanting to see kind of how they get more youth into the workforce.
How do they determine their skill set? Like, do they do testing or?
Well, what you have to do is you have to fill out a full application, and then as long as you fill out the application, then they find out exactly what you're good for, and then they'll give you the necessary experience or job that will help you in your career.
That sounds good. Does anyone else, there's some people haven't said much and they don't have to say anything, but does anyone else have anything to say? Jerry, I got your message about the texting link not seeming to work. So I have my Twitter account open. If anyone wants to tweet at GTT program, I can pass your messages along. Maybe it's not that accessible, because I did try to do it once and nothing came through, so it's possible that isn't working well. Anyway, anyone else?
I have one sentence.
Yes.
I'll see if I can do it in one sentence. As part of being a teacher of the blind, one of the skills we are to teach students is self-advocacy. And one of my students was blind and a quadriplegic. And I've been reviewing self-advocacy for years with her. And then I sort of asked her, so what is self-advocacy? And she said, speak up and make things better. I can't think of a better definition. So I share that. That's all. Speak up and make things better. Period.
And I'm sure that it's not easy for people when they're new to disability and they're already sort of standing out because they're standing out because of the disability anyway, which is different maybe for them. And then having to fight. Like apparently, I don't remember this, but apparently when I was 5 or 6 and I had a really bad day with people not letting me go to do dance class or take something or do something, I got really mad and I was banging on the wall and saying, I guess I just have to fight all the time, fight! And my family said, well, that's not necessarily untrue, but you don't have to do it all the time. You know, sometimes it just feels like that you're always explaining it, and you're always fighting it. You're always banging your head on the wall.
Well, if I might chime in, I think that groups like this are really, really helpful, where you can go somewhere and talk about some of the things that you're dealing with or some of the problems that you're dealing with and the barriers, and you can really learn from other people how they've dealt with these barriers.
Because I did call Shelley that morning when I said that to that lady, and I'm like, guess what happened to me just now? I had this lady, and you know, and I mean, it felt good to kind of say. I got a message back. Oh no, that was the same.
Well, I actually, last week I had to go to the bank, and I don't know if anybody else belongs to BMO, but lately they seem to be pushing moving your Smart Saver account or whatever into something called Builder's account. And I did, and plus I wanted to top up my TFSA. So they set up an appointment, but I just felt that obviously I couldn't see, and I explained to her that I can't see to sign this or whatever. Could you explain the whole process? I found they were not able to really explain things to me very well. I went home with, my daughter had actually called for herself too, to find out what is this new builder's account, which I didn't realize that you had to transfer minimum $200 a month into. So my daughter told me this afterwards. But, so I was a little bit angry about that, and she couldn't explain my TFSA account to me very well. So I wasn't happy with the experience, and I felt like she did not have the ability, or the staff just weren't trained to deal with someone who obviously couldn't read the pamphlet, because she just gave me a pamphlet, and I said, well, I'm sorry, I can't read that, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, they always follow up with a telephone survey afterwards. So I kind of let them have it. Well, I mean, I wasn't rude. I just told them exactly what I had felt, and it was on a scale from 0 to 10, and I think just about everything was 4 to 5.
Yeah, good for you.
And then the manager did call me back and asked me, said, I got your survey. And I think, but I was trying to explain to him that, you must have other customers who can't see. So
good for
you
you.
need to be a little more, you need to train your staff better.
Did you feel better after that?
I do.
Yeah, see it.
Even if you can't see, they should know their job better than that.
A point to keep in mind is that both telecommunications and banking are federally regulated, and they have an obligation to be inclusive for all Canadians.
I have a message from Albert. He also can't get the text box working. So he says, hi, Kim. Albert, who's doing GTTs in the West, he says, hi, Kim. Haven't been able to find the texting link on the PC. However, think I found it on the iPhone. So have sent in a comment thanking Vangelis for his presentation. It's a chat link found at the bottom of the iPhone screen. Thanks. So I'm not sure if that helps anyone. But should we break and have?
Yeah.
Okay, but can I just ask one thing? Because maybe we'll break and just finish the actual meeting. But I want to. I want to thank Vangelis for doing this for us. Very good. And I want to thank everybody, and really thanks to the people who help us all the time, like Heather and Carol and Ellen and David Green does a lot of training. Sam has also helped. Shelley, all of you, Rebecca Jackson. I don't know. The thing about GTT that's so wonderful is the big collaboration, and I just feel that without everybody is so generous with your time and your support to everybody else, which I just feel so happy about it. And also, do we want to do a little drop in GTT on July the 20th, which would be the next. If people aren't here, it's okay.
That's a Monday?
It's a Monday. Just a drop in maybe for an hour. Just no topic, just a kind of a thing. Just think about it. If you do, give me an email and I'll be here if there's, enough to make it useful.
If there's
How many is enough to make it useful?
6, 7, 8, I don't know.
Yeah, I might be.
I mean,
if
I
I'm
think-
around.
Yeah, if people are around. And also,
Can we get pineapples?
well, I will buy you.
Yeah, might as well.
Pineapple, I won't eat it myself, but I'll buy you that because you're so good, but I don't know. So, anyone else have anything we need to say? We're gonna have some, thanks to Mary, we're gonna have some Welsh cakes, and there's probably coffee and tea,
and so on.
I don't want to hold it up, I just want to say something on top of what Alan said, in terms of speak out and make something happen, even just a little bit. It doesn't have to be much.
Yes.
Step forward is good.
Well, we thank the 4 people. Are there still 4 people listening online?
Yep, we're watching right now.
And they can't find the. Did Albert's text get through, George?
I don't see it here.
Okay, so obviously there's something we have to figure out
Yeah, I
for
think.
blind people about chatting on the YouTube channel. Because I thought I texted something last time and nothing came through. Sorry, Albert. And thanks to the 4 of you. I don't know who you are, but send me an email and let me know your experience. I know about the texting didn't work, but beyond that, maybe send me an email about the rest of it. Okay. I'm going to take this off.
So I'm going to kill the stream now?
Sure.
Kim, are we reconvening after our break?